How's it going, Yankee fans? My name is Alex with my co-host here, Ryan Garcia, and today we're going to discuss Clay Holmes coming back from the injury list. He has looked fantastic lately. They've changed his game a little bit. Ryan has some really good insight and information into what they've done to extrapolate on his talents and kind of get him back to where he was before this most recent injury list spell. You know, he was dealing with some, back spasms, was it? Like lower back issue? This is kind of a situation. Was it back? Was it back issues?
Yeah, I mean, it was back issues. I'm pretty sure it was like a phantom IL because he came
Okay.
back. He didn't even have to do rehab, so probably it was a phantom IL stint.
Okay, yeah. So they're trying to give him some time of rest and get him back to where he was. He was struggling a little bit before that injury spell, but now he's back. He's looking really sharp. He's done a couple of things to tweak his game, and he's seemingly back to where he was in terms of high leverage situations. He's dominating once again. The Yankees need him to be doing that because since the offense isn't performing very well, a lot of these games are like 1-2 run leads if they are leading at all, and they need Holmes to close them out. They need him to shut the opposing team down the ninth inning, and he did that pretty efficiently against the Twins in that most recent win. They had a three run lead, but still, we've seen the Yankees blow some leads recently that were not very optimistic and not very confidence brewing. But before we dive into Clay Holmes, what he's done to change his game, why he's been so successful lately, Ryan, how you do today, my friend?
I'm doing great. The big thing with Clay Holmes is the Yankees are a bullpen that it's not a bad bullpen. I think it's a really deep bullpen, but they kind of need that identity, that guy that Aaron Boone can go to in the highest leverage situations of a baseball game every single day. And Clay Holmes was that for the Yankees. And it felt like they lost that, and it was really, really, really a huge blow because it takes away those lanes, right? Not to say that Aaron Boone's job is the most difficult job in the world. It's not like he has a bad bullpen, but not knowing who to go to in the ninth inning it's difficult, right? It's a change of pace from years before the Yankees have always had that set number one guy. And considering that Clay Holmes really wasn't supposed to have injury issues, it's not even like an injury that you would say, oh, he's injury prone. No, it was a phantom IL stint because he was struggling. His release point was off, whether it was fatigue or not. He wasn't the same, and he's coming back. He's throwing a new type of slider. In last year, he had more of a gyro slider. He actually talked about this on Towing the Slab, the John Boy podcast. I believe David Cohn's on that and Justin Shackle as well, where he talked about before the season, having a sweeping slider and getting more horizontal movement on it. And it succeeded. It was a very good pitch. But it seemed as if, he's trying to use two different sliders, have, that third kind of pitch. I put it in quotation marks, but think of it like we see fastballs, right? A four-seam fastball and a sinker are classified as fastballs, but they're completely different pitches and they function in completely different ways. The same thing can be said about sliders. We shouldn't look at all sliders the same. A gyro slider has, that dropping action, not as much horizontal movement. It doesn't move across the horizontal plane nearly as much. And then the sweeping slider is, you think, Greg Weissert slider, or Ron Marnasio slider, or Lucas Lipke slider. Those are sweeping sliders. You think of gyro sliders, think of guys, like Tyones last year was very much a gyro slider. It kind of just has that dropping action. Luis Castillo is very infamous for his gyro slider. It's we're kind of reaching a point in time in baseball where we need to start looking at sliders the way we look at fastballs, where, they're pitches that pitchers will go to as their primary pitch, and they're also pitches that can be thrown two completely different ways and have served two completely different purposes and mirror with different pitches completely differently. So he's trying to utilize having two sliders. We know Clay Holmes never really has had a third pitch per se, not that he's necessarily in desperate need of one, but he's never had that. And perhaps this new weapon gives him, a little bit of like something new, something to give hitters a new look that he can command decently. I saw in the Gary Sanchez at bat, I know it didn't go, a lot of people didn't notice this, but he used two different sliders in that at bat. The first pitch is a sweeper down and away. The second pitch is a called strike at 89 miles an hour, a gyro slider. It had only 3 inches of horizontal sweep instead of those, double digit numbers you see from his other sliders. And then he goes back with another sweeper, and Gary is bamboozled. He doesn't know what to do. He swings over the top on it. And, not to harp on Gary here, but ultimately that's Holmes doing a very good job mixing and matching pitches. We saw this against Yandy Diaz, where he was mixing up his sliders there too. If you see a slider at 90, 91, that's more of a gyro slider. You see those slower sliders tend to be sweepers. Holmes is doing a good job with that. I think that'll be something in his arsenal, something in his back pocket. I don't think we'll see him completely ditch the sweeper. I still think that'll be his primary slider. But that gyro slider breaking out and getting some called strikes and some weak contact could definitely be a big asset for him.
Absolutely. You're seeing, like you said, a better usage of his pitches. You're seeing in this past month, his pitch repertoire and sequence has become a little bit more, I guess you could say, even split between slider and sinker. The sinker still heavily favors, but it's decreased over the last couple of weeks. You're talking about in September so far, he's only using the sinker at 77.4%, and the slider's up to 22.6%. Obviously, small sample size. September just started, but you look at August compared to July. July, he was only using a slider at less than 10%. It ballooned to 18% in August. Then in July, 90% sinker usage to 82%. It seems like the league just kind of caught up to his sinker a little bit, and he had to make some shifts because they were expecting it. They knew where the run was. They knew what it was doing. And ultimately, they had to change, kind of the sequence to keep batters on edge. And it's really just about finding the right combination to extrapolate on that strength and make sure that batters aren't expecting. They don't know what's coming. When you're throwing the sinker at 80%, you can pretty much guess every time it's going to be a sinker and be right 80% of the time, which is, can become a problem down the stretch after batters see it enough times. But, that slider, like you mentioned, is absolutely unbelievable. To give you some insight into the actual movement of that pitch, you're looking at the vertical movement. The slider moves 11% more than the average pitcher at 39.8 inches of drop, but it's where the horizontal movement, like you said, the sweeping nature of it, this is the best slider I think I've ever seen in terms of horizontal movement. He has 12.5 inches of break on the slider, but he's generating 136% more break than the average pitcher. That is unbelievable. I don't think you can possibly comprehend how much that pitch is actually moving until you see it, and especially if it's coming out the same arm angle as that sinker, how do you determine until it's halfway to you? It looks like the same pitch. It looks like a fastball, and then bam, it tails off to the left there. And you're pretty much just trying to figure out where the hell it's going. It's a frisbee word that you like to use, and it's averaging out at 85.4 miles an hour. So it's a little bit slower, obviously about 11 miles an hour slower on average than compared to his sinker. But still, when you have a pitch that lethal with that much movement, you're talking about a batter swinging at it, look like it's going to go down the middle, and then it ends up outside of the plate. So it's hard to actually figure out where that pitch is going to land. But I'll ask you this, heading down into the playoffs, you're going up against bigger, better teams. Can you rely on this sequence right now? Do you think that they start to catch up to him again? Do you think that that slider is the primary catalyst for his success the rest of the way? Or do you think he really just has to, throw that sinker at premium, because I feel like that was his go-to pitch. That was his primary one. Batter started to kind of catch up to it, lost a little bit of its movement, maybe before that injury spell just because of the fatigue. But maybe they give him a couple of days off rest towards the end of the season. I don't know. Just interesting kind of discussion to have.
Yeah. So to me, at least, I look at a guy like Clay Holmes, and I think he's just such an important part of this team, and that sinker is such an important part of what he does in terms of getting ground balls. But as I mentioned earlier, sliders are pitches that are seen to be their primary pitch now. They're the second most used pitch behind fastballs, right? Guys are becoming slider first guys instead of fastball first guys for the first time across the league in forever, right? We've never seen this before. And so for Clay Holmes, having multiple, having that slider be used a little bit more, and again, having two sliders, again, this is kind of not revolutionary in the sense this is still stuff that sweepers are still a pitch that is kind of still getting its feet wet in terms of, in the grand scheme of things, right? As a pitch that people are teaching as a concept, all of these things. But we're seeing a little bit of that pushback, right? The league kind of corrects itself and everyone starts throwing sweepers, and then the league is starting to adjust and figure out, hey, okay, this guy maybe shouldn't always throw a sweeper, maybe use a sweeper and a gyro slider. And perhaps we see Holmes say, okay, my slider is unhittable. I have a great sinker, but if I want to go and get it, attack a guy like Gary Sanchez, that's a great adjustment considering he hit the longest home run hit against the Yankees all season off of a sinker. Town tries to bury it down and in, and Holmes adjusts. He realizes, hey, look, he's on that sinker. He knows the Yankees game plan to try to bury him down and in. Let's go slider, slider, slider. Let's force him to swing at pitches that he's not comfortable swinging at, right? You mentioned the movement on the slider, right? That's what makes, sliders such a coveted pitch. They're easy to throw in comparison. You can say throw it like your fastball, and they get a lot of movement in comparison to your fastball. Guys can hit 98 nowadays. 98 is not something that players and hitters aren't prepared to hit. I talked about this in my Loizaga article, talking about how movement matters a lot. Loizaga threw a 99-mile-per-hour sinker right to Yoan Moncada, and he crushes it. And you know why he does that? Because guys are geared up to hit 99. If you don't have great movement, if your pitches aren't moving, if you're not deceiving hitters, if hitters aren't on the back foot, you're not going to get outs at the major league level. And you can't put them on the back foot with velocity, just straight up velocity anymore. You have to have great movement. You have to have secondary pitches. You have to have a great slider or a great off-speed pitch or a great curveball, whatever it may be, to put hitters on the back foot. And I think Holmes is kind of realizing his slider, or not kind of realizing, I think Holmes knows his slider is a very good pitch. I think the Yankees are going to start calling games, or game calling or pitch calling for him, to allow him to use that slider more freely. Even against, Max Kepler, he buries sinkers against him, right? It's not like he has to commit to anything. There doesn't have to be, Clay Holmes and pitchers nowadays don't have to conform to one thing. We aren't trying to use a mold for them. It's just kind of, go based off what's working and what's not. And for Holmes, if his slider's working, go with it. I still think the sinker's a great pitch. And, he has 2 pitches that are elite. So can't really go wrong either way here.
Absolutely. We're going to see how he fares the rest of the way. Hopefully he continues this successful streak and starts to, commit to his slider sinker with more confidence. And, that sinker, obviously usage has dropped off a little bit, but I imagine it'll probably spike back up with a larger sample size in September. But nonetheless, that IL spell, I guess, really fixed him. He needed the rest. And, this is what we needed from him to close out some of these close games of the offense struggling. But guys, hope you enjoyed this video of Fireside Yankees. Taking a look at Clay Holmes. We'd love to hear perspectives and narratives below, as always, in the YouTube comments. Make sure to like and subscribe. We'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.